Sairam, brothers and sisters, I want to thank Swami for this golden opportunity to share some divine experiences that I've had with him over the years. May Swami guide my words so they're helpful and truthful. I also want to thank Sri Chakravarti, the Global Council Chairman, Sri Ratnakar, the Management Trustee of the Sri Satya Sai Central Trust, and all the members of the Central Trust and Global Council, and the organizers as well. It is a great pleasure to talk about Swami because for me, for almost 50 years, he's been my guru, he's been my guide, my best friend, divine mother and father, all of that. I first found out about Swami in 1976 from a spiritual teacher in New York City named Hilda Charlton. And then my wife and I made our first trip over in 1977. Those of you who go back that far and remember what the ashram was, the vast difference in the ashram, it's extraordinary what Swami has created here. And I remember how for darshan, this was sand that you were sitting on, well, on a cushion, hopefully. And in those days, there were really only a few hundred people most of the time. So in darshan, there were maybe 3 or 4 rows, and you were guaranteed to have a good seat for darshan. I remember my first darshan, I was in the front row, and Swami came out, and it's always been, when Swami gives darshan, there's total silence. In those days, there was no roof here, so you heard crows, a lot of crows making noise. But other than that, total silence. And the air was filled with reverence and awe as Swami came around. So there I was in the front row, and Swami is coming around. He's getting closer, and then he stopped right in front of me, and he looked down at me, and he asked me a question in a language that I didn't know. And I didn't know what to say. I was just looking up at him, having no idea what he just said. And then an Indian man sitting next to me tapped me on the shoulder and said, "He's asking you where you're from." So I turned to answer, and Swami had walked away. So that was my first interaction with Swami. It was a little joke on me. He knew that I didn't know the language, but Swami is very mischievous. As some of you know, he likes to play little jokes on people, and they're always divine and delightful jokes. At that time, on the first trip, my wife Janice and I, we had been together for several years, but we had never had a ceremony. And so on the first trip, she asked Swami if he would marry us. And at first he said, "Ceremony not necessary. To be one is what's important." But she asked him again a little later, and he said, "I will marry you next time you come." Well, wow. So a year later, we're back here at Prasanthi, and she reminded Swami, as if Swami needs reminding of anything. She said, "Swami, you said you'd marry us next time we come." And he said, "Yes, I will marry you in the morning, tomorrow morning." Well, wow, he did. The next morning, this was in Whitefield, he did not a traditional Indian ceremony, but what he does for Westerners. And there were about 12 people in the room. I was so overwhelmed I could hardly speak. I couldn't believe it was actually happening. And Swami talked about marriage. And then at one point he turned to me and he said, "Where are the rings?" I said, "Swami, I didn't bring any rings." He said, "Where are the rings?" He said, "Okay." And he waved his hand, and you heard a little clink, and there were 2 rings in his hand. One for my wife, one for myself, and they were perfect fits for both of us. Now, my ring over the years turned black, and some of the stones fell out. And my understanding is that sometimes Swami will give somebody an object, and it draws out of them the karma or some kind of darkness. And that's what happened with my ring. I haven't worn my ring for many years. I have it in a little box at home. That did not happen to my wife's ring. So in 1978, in an interview on that trip, Swami told me I would be doing music in the future. And at that time, I wasn't doing music professionally, but about 9 years later, through his grace, I was blessed to have a beautiful music project that promotes spiritual ideals, which became my career and my wife's for 32 years. How it all happened would take much too much time, but my wife and I, we formed a music group of professional singers, adults, and professional young singers, teenagers, and I wrote the songs, and they were based on Swami's EHV teachings. We called the group Vitamin L. You can guess what the L stands for. We made several recordings that had, over a period of years, that had 52 songs that I wrote. We did 1,195 concerts, mostly in elementary schools. We performed at the United Nations. We performed with some very famous people, and we won a number of awards for all of our recordings. Although the songs were geared toward young people, the subjects of the songs really apply to any age at all. And some of the songs were used, have been used in EHV programs throughout the US and overseas. And although in America you can't go into an elementary school and talk about religion, I certainly couldn't go in and talk about Sai Baba, but all of these songs were based on his teachings, and we reached hundreds of thousands of children who learned these songs through the recordings and through the concerts, who were singing essentially Swami's teachings. In addition to my role as the songwriter and one of the performers in Vitamin L, my wife Janice was behind the scenes. She was the director and the grant writer and organizer, and did incredible work for Vitamin L. And both of us have always felt that it was just a divine gift from Swami to be able to do something like this, to use our creativity, to have jobs that spread love and goodwill and had spiritual ideals, and to make a living doing it. We did it for 32 years. When COVID came along, we had to stop doing the performing aspect of it. But the best job I ever had and will ever have, that was a gift from Swami. We made another trip over in 1979, and on that trip, something very unusual happened. Baba had gone to Uti, and so we followed him there. And while we were in Uti, a young American man, a devotee, who was very wealthy, had dreams of doing a movie in India, and he wanted to have me do the music to it. He approached me in Uti and he said, look, if you do the music to this movie, I will pay you a salary. I'll pay your wife a salary. She could be the bookkeeper. I'll put you up in a house in Whitefield, and I'll pay for trips back and forth to America when you want to see your families. So it was a fantastic offer, and almost right after that, we had an interview with Swami. And we told Swami about this, and he said, yes, stay in India a long time. And so in that very short span of time, our lives changed tremendously, and we wound up living in India for 3.5 years. We were in a house in Whitefield, and when Swami would give darshan, when he was in Whitefield, we'd just travel up the road. When he was in Prasanthi, we followed him to Prasanthi. So, to make a long story short, the movie was never made. I wrote the music to it, but it was just something orchestrated by Swami to keep us both in India for 3.5 years. And during that time, I have to confess, I never went to bhajans. I was raised on Western music, Western melodies. I didn't appreciate the bhajans the way I do now, the melodies. I didn't know what the words meant, so I never went. But one day here in Prasanthi, I decided I was going to go. And I decided this at the last second. They were already singing in the mandir. So I quickly went up, and I was about to go in the back there. Swami usually came in the front and sat in his chair. But Swami was walking around in the front here, and our eyes met just before I went in the back. So I go inside, I'm sitting there, and I'm just sort of swaying to the music, waiting for Swami to come in the front so I could look at him. The next thing I know, I'm waking up out of a very altered state of consciousness. I can't really think of how to describe it, but just another world completely. And I feel somebody poke me on the back of my neck. I open my eyes, I'm not even sure where I am, and I turn to see who poked me, and it's Swami. He's standing right behind me, and he has a big smile on his face, and he says, "How is it that you come to know bhajans?" Well, that was an incredible experience. Apparently what had happened was, instead of him going in the front, he came in the back. He stood behind me for a few seconds and put me into this other world, and then he tapped me on the neck and said what he said, "How is it that you come to know the bhajans?" It was a fantastic Leela, and it showed me a few different things. One is, he can control your consciousness just by his will, because that's what he did there. And even though there were plenty of people, he knew that I didn't go to bhajans. How does he know this one guy doesn't go? Well, he knows a lot of things. He knows everything. And he's also showed me he has a great sense of humor. These Leelas that happen, they're delightful, but they're also instructional, and they deepen our faith. We may accept intellectually, Swami knows, he's omniscient, omnipresent, and so on, but when we have an experience like that, it really confirms those, it deepens those feelings, it makes them real. So, well, I could go on and on about Swami, but I'm running out of time here. There are many beautiful things that happen to us as Swami devotees. It's not always an easy path. You know, the karma of many lifetimes, I mean, it's a great blessing, but is being burnt up in one lifetime. And that's can be a painful experience. And the ego is getting dissolved. Also, that can be a pretty rough ride, but what a great blessing it is. And there's plenty of tests as well. I can say I have not passed all of the tests, but he hasn't given up on me, and he won't give up on you either. We just have to keep going. He said we're all going to make it. That's his assurance, and we all will. Sai Ram. Thank you.